The Hebrew prophets. From the days of Moses, the first great prophet of Israel, who had led his people out of Egypt to the land of Canaan, there had always been prophets among the Hebrews. But most of the great prophets had lived in those few hundred years just before the golden age of Greece. One of these three questions, which held the interest of Greek philosophers, the early Hebrew prophets had been interested only in the second. How can we live in this world with other people and be happy? And to that question, this was their one and only answer. Thou shalt hearken to the voice of thy God, and do that which is right in the eyes of the Lord. The Hebrews had been living almost 400 years in that land of the Phoenicians or Canaanites, to which Moses had led them, when there arose another great prophet, the prophet Elijah. Like a whirlwind out of the desert came Elijah, out of the wilderness beyond the Jordan River. Dressed only in a hairy skin held about him with a leather girdle, he came stalking into the city of Bethel. There he bespoke the judgment of the Lord upon the wicked king. For the king and the people of Israel had now deserted the God of their fathers for the gods of the Canaanites. It was not to Jerusalem, but to the city of Bethel that Elijah went, because of the 12 tribes, which David had formed into a nation, were no longer united. After the death of David's son, King Solomon, the 10 northern tribes had broken away to form the kingdom of Israel, leaving only 2 tribes in the kingdom of Judah, centered in Jerusalem. In the days of Elijah, the king of Israel had married a Phoenician princess, and to please his queen in the city of Bethel, he had built a temple to Baal, the god of the Canaanites. For this cried Elijah, as the Lord liveth, before whom I stand, there shall not be dew nor rain for the years upon this land. 3 years of drought and famine followed, during which Elijah lived inside a brook, fed only by the ravens, and then he returned. Art thou he who is making trouble in Israel? Grumbled the king. I have not troubled Israel, answered Elijah, but thou and thy father's house. Ye have forsaken the Lord and followed after Baal. Now therefore send and gather all the people of Israel unto Mount Carmel, and the prophets of Baal 450. There on Mount Carmel Elijah proposed a test to prove that which was true of God, Jehovah, or Baal. First, the prophets of Baal laid a bullock on their altar and tried by crying and jumping, slashing their arms with knives, to bring down fire upon it, but in vain. Then Elijah laid a bullock on the altar to Jehovah, and it was said the people saw fire sent down from heaven to consume the offering, and they fell on their faces crying, He is the true God, the Lord, Jehovah, He is God. And Elijah said unto them, Take the prophets of Baal, let none of them escape. And Elijah slew them, every one. And soon the heaven was black with clouds and wind, and there was a great rain. The drought was over. To escape the vengeance of the angry queen, Elijah fled for his life. In time, he and his disciples Elisha were walking by the Jordan River near Jericho. And it came to pass, as they still went on and talked, that behold, there appeared a chariot of fire and horses of fire, and Elijah went up by the whirlwind into heaven. 100 years after Elijah came the prophet Amos. Amos was the first Hebrew prophet to put his words into writing. So the book of Amos, although now placed far from the beginning among the books in the Bible, is believed to be the first one to be written about the time that Rome was supposed to have been founded. Amos was a herdsman. Though he lived in Judah, not far from Jerusalem, he also often took wool north to be sold in Bethel, the rich city of Israel. A plain, honest man each time he went. Amos was shocked by what he saw. Princes, priests, all the rich and powerful of the city were robbing the poor, and yet before the altar made great show of their religion. The injustice of it, the falseness of it, burned within him, until one day Amos was given the courage to speak, and his voice was hard and harsh as he prophesied the awful day of judgment to come. Hear this word, ye cattle who oppress the poor and crush the needy. Hear this word that the Lord has spoken against you, O children of Israel. Because you tread upon the poor and take from him his share of wheat, though you have built houses of hewn stone, you shall not live in them. I despise your feast days, saith the Lord. Though ye offer me burnt offerings and your meat offerings, I will not accept them. For I know thy many transgressions and thy mighty sins. Behold, the eyes of the Lord are on this sinful nation, and I will destroy it. The high priest of Bethel, unable to bear the true words of Amos, denounced this courageous prophet as a traitor and had him driven away. But Amos wrote down his words of righteous indignation, that they might never be forgotten. Hosea and Micah, who followed Amos very shortly, also feared and believed that God would punish the people of Israel for their sins. Yet they saw him as more gentle and loving than Amos had imagined him. He would turn away his anger and said, "Love them freely," said Hosea, "if they will simply do what he required of them." "And what doth the Lord require of thee?" said Micah. "But to do justly, and to love mercy, and to walk humbly with my God, thy God." Yet if the people of Israel would not listen, they must suffer, and the people of Jerusalem too. Not even the great temple would save them from the disaster the Lord would send upon them for their wickedness. "Because of you, Jerusalem shall become a ruin," said Micah, "and the hill of the temple as a place in the forest." And as they feared, the blow fell first upon Israel. In the year 722 BC, the northern kingdom was destroyed, and the 10 tribes carried off to exile in Babylon, never to return, but to be lost forever. Foreigners were moved into Samaria. That was during the lifetime of the great prophet Isaiah. Isaiah was a native of Jerusalem and had been counselor to the kings of Judah for over 20 years when the kingdom of Israel was destroyed. And he could see that just as surely as Israel had fallen, Jerusalem would fall, for the kings of Judah were also wicked. "Woe unto ye that have made unrighteous decrees," he said unto them. "Hear ye the word of the Lord, ye rulers. To what purpose are your many sacrificed, saith the Lord? I will hide my eyes from you. Your hands are full of blood. Wash you, make you clean, seek justice, relieve the poor, watch over the fatherless, and plead for the widow. Come now, let us reason together, saith the Lord. If ye be willing and obedient, ye shall eat the good of the land. But if ye refuse and rebel, ye shall be devoured with the sword, for the mouth of the Lord hath spoken it." But Isaiah saw further than that to the time when, purged of its sin, Jerusalem would be reestablished as a city of righteousness. And even further, he seemed to see to the time when a great and wise king should come forth in the family tree of David. "And the Spirit of the Lord shall rest upon him, the Spirit of wisdom and understanding, and his name shall be called Wonderful, Counselor, the Prince of Peace. Of the increase of his government and peace there shall be no end upon the throne of David, and he shall judge among nations, and they will beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks, neither shall they learn war any more." Such was the vision of Isaiah, while he still continued to warn the kings of their coming destruction. In the end, it is said, one king, more wicked than the others, did away with the old prophet by having him sawed in two. The king had now set up the image of Babylonian goddess Ishtar in the sacred temple, and altars to the sun and the moon and all the other planet gods of Babylon for the people to worship. Jeremiah. And then about 50 years later came the great prophet Jeremiah. Jeremiah is often called the weeping prophet, for though he worked, pleaded, and prophesied unceasingly, he also wept, as well he might, for he could not turn the minds and hearts of the people from their wickedness. He was mocked at, thrown into a slimy dungeon, and when he predicted that Jerusalem would surely fall, he was seized as a traitor and barely escaped death. And then came the dark days when Jerusalem did fall. The temple was destroyed, and all but a handful of people were carried off to Babylon. As a young man, Jeremiah had had hope that the people would be brought back to God of their fathers. A good king had come to the throne, and in repairing the temple, there were found in the wall a book called Deuteronomy, or the Laws of Moses, which had been written and hidden there during the evil days of the wicked king who had killed the prophet Isaiah. But Jeremiah soon realized that enforcing the law could not change the hearts of the people, and that true religion did not come from without, but from within. And so he predicted that in the days to come the Lord would make a new covenant with his people. And in those days, saith the Lord, I will put my law in their inward parts, and write in it their hearts. And no more shall every man teach his neighbor, saying, Know the Lord, for they shall all know me, for the least of them unto the greatest. In the times of the Persians had conquered Babylonia, and it was a Persian king who set free the Judeas, or Jews, as they were from then on to be called, he allowed them to return to Jerusalem. Like the Roman captives returning from Parthia, the Jews in time the Persians had conquered Babylonia, and it was the Persian king who set free the Judeans or Jews, as they were from then on to be called. He allowed them to return to Jerusalem. Like the Roman captives returning from Parthia, the Jews who had lived there in ancient Babylon had also learned of the great religion formed by the prophet Zoroaster. They learned of the Persian idea of paradise, of angels of light and the devil of darkness. And the Hebrew prophets began to be interested, as they had not been before, in the question of what might happen to a man after he was dead, and to believe in life after death. One of these prophets was Daniel, who lived at the court of the Persian king. Many of them that slept in the dust of the earth, said Daniel, shall awake, some to everlasting life, some to shame and everlasting contempt. But this reward or punishment was not to be meted out as soon as each man died, as the Persians believed, but on some awful day of the wholesale judgment, of which Daniel beheld a vision in the night. And I beheld unto the thrones of the earth were cast down, and the Ancient of Days did sit, whose garment was white as snow, and the hair of his head like pure wool. 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him. The judgment was set, and the books were opened. And behold, one like the Son of God came with clouds of heaven, and came to the Ancient of Days, and they brought him near before him. And they were given him dominion and glory, an everlasting dominion, and a kingdom that shall not be destroyed. It was to be a heavenly kingdom, according to Daniel, ruled over by some celestial being, a kingdom of heaven. Malachi. By this day of judgment predicted by the prophets was not to come upon people without warning. They would be warned of it, said Malachi, who was the last of the old prophets. For behold, the day cometh that shall burn as an oven, and all the proud, yea, and all that do wickedly. The day cometh that shall burn them up, said the Lord. But unto you that fear my name shall the Son of Righteousness arise with healing in his wings. Behold, I will send you Elijah the prophet before the coming of the great and dreadful day. So Elijah was coming to warn them when the day of judgment was upon them, and the kingdom of heaven was at hand.